Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners to order. And we're going to start off today with Pastor Andrew leading us in prayer.
Father, we come before you this morning and we thank you for your love and your grace that you've bestowed on us. As we come this morning and make decisions, may you give us wisdom and discernment to know what's best for the people that we serve in this community. Father, we come before you humbly. We know that everything we have belongs to you. We are just stewards of all things because you are the owner of all things. Father, bless this time together with these leaders in our community. May you give them wisdom and guidance to make the right decisions in order to best serve the people around us. Father, thank you. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your mercy. In your son's name, amen.
Thank you. All right, if you could please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Cosby. Here. Mrs. Ebel. Here. Mr. Zylstra.
Here.
Mr. Bonema.
Here.
Mr. Moss.
Here.
Mr. Terpstra.
Here.
Mrs. Curran. Here. Mrs. Rhodey. Here. Mr. Belknap.
Here.
Mr. Bergman.
Here.
Mrs. Miedema. Here. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Seeing as we have no correspondence, we'll move to public comment. If you would please come forward and you have 3 minutes to address the chair. Do we have a list?
Yes.
Right.
Number 1, Michael Kuras, Spring Lake Township.
I am Michael Kuras. I live in Spring Lake Township. I have 3 minutes. I want to address the upcoming budget deliberations. The county administrator has submitted a draft budget for 2024, which begins on October 1st of this year. I thank the administrator for the draft budget submitted. In between today and September 26th, several things will happen or are already happening. The finance committee of this board is already reviewing the draft budget. On September 12th, there will be a mandated public hearing. On September 19th, just 1 week before the board is scheduled to adopt the finalized budget, the finance committee will make its own recommendations regarding the budget to the full board. As you know, the budget contains many different categories, in particular, many different appropriations categories. How money will be spent. Unless a person is well versed in the definitions of those categories, even when the actual amounts are revealed, a person is still in the dark regarding the policy preferences guiding the board's decision regarding the 2024 budget. So let me ask you to do this. When the actual proposed budget for 2024 is revealed to the public, it hasn't been yet, and the proposed changes relative to the current year's budget are noted, please also indicate whether the proposed changes affirm or alter the policy preferences of this board relative to the previous boards. For example, if the county still had a DEI department and this board decided to do away with that department beginning in 2024, that appropriations category would show a proposed decrease of roughly $250,000 from 2023 to 2024. Such a change would reflect an altered policy preference of this board. In the interest of transparency, this information is important to share with the public. And one more thing, exactly when will the public be able to see a proposed draft budget for 2024? Thank all of you for your time.
Thank you.
Number 2, Christy Meppelink, Zealand Township.
Hello, I'm Christy Meppelink from Zealand Township. At the last meeting, I addressed the fact that the prior Board of Commissioners rushed to spend almost $57 million of ARPA taxpayer funds. They spent the final $30 million in the last few months of 2022 as they were leaving office, even though the funds didn't need to be obligated until the end of 24 or spent until the end of 26. I shared how almost 10% of the funds went to employee payouts last November. I recently discovered that county employees received even more than 10% of the funds. There was a budgeted 2% pay increase at the beginning of 22, and then through ARPA funds in April, they also received another 2% base pay increase along with a $2,000 loyalty payout. The board agreed to give the final 5.2 million employee payouts at the October 25 meeting, knowing that employees would get another budgeted 2% increase in January of 23. In answer to how spending priorities were determined, the prior county administrator, John Shea, was quoted as saying, "The idea is to spend the funds on one-time projects or on programs that can sustain themselves when the ARPA funds are exhausted and that have a significant impact on reducing or eliminating longstanding problems in the community." On top of the employee payouts, over 6.3 million was allocated to parks and trail projects that didn't have set deadlines. We love our county parks, but did those funds or the employee payouts meet the objectives stated by Mr. Shea? Did the prior commissioners make the best use of our taxpayer burden? Could the funds have been used to make ADA upgrades that were allowed to fall behind? Could those funds have been used to make a positive impact on the upcoming budget? During the October 25 meeting, the commissioner stated that our county deputies do not have body cams. According to a 2016 Wood TV article, when Sheriff Kempker had been promoted to office, he was seeking to implement body cams. The administrator's office stated that it had earmarked $1 million for the project when it moved forward. 2 years ago, the board approved over $84,000 in the annual budget for a body cam tech specialist. Even though a majority of commissioners were in place when Sheriff Kempker took office, including Mr. Bergman, who is still on the board, this project has never been implemented. Surrounding counties have body cams, yet 7 years later, Ottawa County is still on hold. Are those funds still available, or how were they used? Our law enforcement team puts their life at risk to go out against the unknown every day to protect us. So Commissioners and Administrator Gibbs, please make sure that the proposed budget includes allocations for body cams, which will increase transparency and accountability for everyone involved and will allow us to properly equip and protect our law enforcement team. Please do everything you can to get this project across the finish line expediently. And thank you for being wise and proactive with our taxpayer dollars, including the development of a strong capital improvement plan. Carry on knowing that Jesus is Lord over Ottawa County.
Thank you.
Number 3, Cindy Cornolia, Talmadge Township.
Knowing that you won't be able to see me because you got the timer right over that thing. That's pretty cool. I'm in the witness protection program, so okay. I gotta tell you, Christy did a wonderful job here. Basically, I was going to kind of say some of the same things, just not as well. I've been hearing lately that you guys have been asking a lot of great questions when it comes to the contracts and stuff like that you guys have been looking at and having the legal team work over these different contracts. And I really appreciate that. I was kind of alarmed to see that we gave such bonuses last year to employees and bonuses that they obviously really didn't need, as far as that they had already gotten some. And so that's my tax dollars. I didn't get any of that. How come, my employer doesn't do that? Also I see that we gave big severance packages, and I do know that was last year, and I do know that was under some different management. But the severance package that was given out for John Shea just seems a bit excessive. Most businesses don't give that, and of all the people that lost their jobs, okay, they're not being treated that way. Again, my tax dollars. Basically, that's all I have to say, except for I just wanted to say that I saw a great TV show this week. Okay. And what it was is that some organization makes these robots, animals, and they put cameras in the eyes. It was really cool. And they put them down by a river, and it was able to view these bears coming down with their cubs to feed. And they accepted the little robot. They did beat on it and they did do tug of war, but it survived. And the next thing you know is down comes a male bear, and it was huge. And I don't know if you know, but male bears will kill the baby bears. Okay. And those mother bears went after that bear, and they are way littler. And boy, did they go after and beat that male bear until he ran. And, you know, when we talk about all these other subjects about children, protecting our children and stuff like that, you know, that's what we are. We're kind of like we're not baby bears. We're the mother bears. Okay. Going after it. Anyway, I just thought it was a really cool thing. And it was on the Grand Valley channels, I think it was. So anyway, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Number 4, Stephen Rockman, Grand Haven Township.
Morning, Commissioners. My comment is about the Deputy Health Administrator, Marcia Mansoray. And I hope no one feels unsafe. The board was elected to take the county in a new direction. But the unelected bureaucrats at the Department of Public Health are defiant. This defiance has shown itself many times. For instance, the Hambley lawsuit, Kinky Sex Ed Week, Pride Festival, and the condescending Ugansky Memorandum of Understanding Action Request. The latest example of defiance is from the Deputy Health Administrator. At a recent meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee, Mansoray asked the committee to approve and forward to the board the Man Therapy campaign contract. The campaign features videos of white working class men stereotyped as redneck Al Bundys. It's the white equivalent of a black man with a large braided gold chain and a gold tooth. She put on the charm offensive to sell this campaign to the committee. She smiled, laughed, and talked with her hands to beguile them. But what was she really thinking? At the Facebook group, Committee to Recall Lucy Ebel, Mansoray posted on August 2nd, 3:58 p.m., could we knock on doors and ask if they are willing to sign and we can come back once the petition beats appeal? The idiom smile on your face and stab you in the back comes to mind. This post is rank insubordination. It's a shameless disrespect for authority. In business, this would most likely result in serious discipline up to including termination. This post also raises the issues of a conflict of interest and an abuse of county time and resources. First of all, how independent and impartial is she? Is she using her position for personal partisan gain? And how can she be trusted to give objective counsel? Secondly, was she using county equipment while working to undermine county leadership? She made her post on a Wednesday afternoon in what appears to be during working hours. At the very least, she has given off the impression that she is acting in bad faith in her role as Deputy Health Administrator. Now, the board has the authority to monitor and evaluate the work of department officials. Perhaps it is time for the board to evaluate the work of this department official. God bless you and good morning.
Thank you.
Number 5, Harvey Nickel, Georgetown Township.
Thank you. I'm Harvey Nickel from Jenison. Thank you for standing up for the citizens of Ottawa County and following through with your campaign promises. Thank you for passing a resolution declaring Ottawa County a constitutional county and for passing a resolution to protect childhood innocence. Thank you for moving one of the meetings to the evening so more citizens can attend. Thank you for giving us the full 3 minutes to comment instead of cutting down to 1 minute as the previous board did. Thank you for allowing us to respectfully show support for comments that we agree with. Thank you for doing your research and uncovering some questionable expenditures and undesirable strings attached to grant monies. I support you and pray that you will continue to have the wisdom to make the best choices for the citizens of Ottawa County and for standing strong against the endless attacks of the media and the opposition. The people who comment against you during these meetings often sing praises about the health department. However, those praises are not warranted considering that they mandated masks that are totally ineffective and they keep pushing the vaccine agenda of the CDC. I was at the Board of Commissioners meeting in June of 2021 when the health department reported that the number of COVID cases dropped significantly and claimed that the drop was due to the vaccination campaign, which began in January. So they strongly encouraged everyone to get the shot. However, that was misleading. They did not tell anyone that the day that Biden's inauguration, the CDC dropped the number of cycles used for this PCR test from 45 to 24. Carrie Mullis, who received the Nobel Prize for discovering the polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, actually recommended 17 to 20 cycles. The PCR technique is typically used to multiply a few strands of DNA into amounts that can be manipulated in the laboratory. Dr. Mullis stated that the PCR should not really be used as a diagnostic technique because you could find almost anything you want if you run the cycles high enough. At 45 cycles, the PCR test for COVID gave a huge number of false positive results. The drop in cases reported by the health department was not due to the vaccinations, but actually due to the decrease in the number of false positives. The COVID shots do not stop infection and they do not stop transmission. We now know that the majority of COVID cases and hospitalizations around the world are people who have taken the shots. And there's more and more evidence that the shots are not safe. For example, consider what has happened to Jamie Foxx, Justin Bieber, and Bronny James. After the COVID shots started, there have been 1,929 athletes having cardiac arrest or serious issues, and 1,345 of them have died. The excess death rate around the world is around 10% higher, and the birth rate is dramatically lower. Yet the media refuses to investigate and adamantly denies that there's any connection to the COVID shot. We need a health department that serves the citizens of this county, and we need a director who will research the actual science instead of blindly following the CDC, the WHO, and Big Pharma.
Thank you.
Number 6, Kendra Wenzel, Georgetown Township.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Kendra Wenzel. I wanted to pop in this morning to thank Gretchen, Lucy, Joe, Rebecca, Sylvia, Roger, and Allison for their wisdom, discernment, and boldness so early on regarding DEI and its destructive mechanisms. I also want to thank these commissioners for their courage in cutting DEI on day one. You were the front runners, and thankfully the rest of our country is beginning to catch on as well. More than a dozen state legislatures have introduced or passed bills reining in DEI programs in colleges and universities. Multiple states, including North Carolina and South Carolina, have introduced bills to track college DEI spending. In Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin banned the teaching of these, quote, inherently divisive concepts in public schools. Ohio has also introduced a bill that would abolish DEI training requirements at public colleges. In North Carolina, legislators recently requested an overview of documents related to DEI training from all colleges in the University of North Carolina system. They have also introduced bills aimed at DEI mandates and hiring, as well as restricting the teaching of racism in public schools. Texas A&M University Chancellor John Sharp stated that no university or agency in the A&M system will admit any student nor hire any employee based on any factor other than merit. The directive standardizes faculty and staff applications and limits them to a cover letter, curriculum vitae, research and teaching philosophy statements, and professional references. It also orders the 11 universities and 8 agencies within the system to make all websites and printed materials dealing with employment and admissions practices compliant with this directive. Texas Governor Greg Abbott's chief of staff sent a letter to state agencies, including universities, notifying them that DEI considerations in hiring is illegal and violates state and federal anti-discrimination laws. He also signed Bill SB 17 to dismantle DEI offices and programs in higher education. Senator Brandon Creighton stated that eliminating DEI would return their campuses to promoting a merit-based approach where individuals are judged on their qualifications, skills, and contributions. He also stated that this would return Texas colleges and universities to their core mission, which is to educate and innovate. Moving on to Florida, the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, which oversees Disney World's operation in the state, announced in a news release on Tuesday, August 1st, that it has abolished all of its DEI programs. I will end with this wise quote from Milton Friedman, a Nobel Prize-winning American economist of the 20th century. A society that puts equality before freedom will get neither. A society that puts freedom before equality will get a high degree of both. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Number 7, Adria Hill, Holland Township.
Good morning. Last week's finance meeting was helpful to help provide a background behind the spreadsheet of numbers in the proposed budget. It's unfortunate that Administrator Gibbs was unable to follow through with the commitment he made in June to schedule a strategic planning meeting, as that would help inform the upcoming budget discussions. Today, I hope to hear more about the strategic priorities for the county in 2024 as you discuss the budget being presented to you. For the commissioner who was not in the finance committee, and for those members of the public who were not here last week, I'm going to share the initiatives that I would like to see the county take on in the upcoming budget year. The continuation of the exceptional parks, road services, and law enforcement. Significant spending that will fund community mental health initiatives, such as a campaign that makes mental health care more approachable to those who are most vulnerable, as well as additional staff to help provide the care that our community members need. And a focus on identifying potential solutions to the lack of affordable housing and childcare that many residents face. The last thing that I hope you consider adding as a priority is positive community engagement that cuts back the infighting and polarization that we see in these meetings and throughout the county. It would be great if we could reduce partisanship and dangerous divisiveness, as I believe this would help the county be more effective in its efforts to address the other priorities I mentioned, and others will mention, I'm sure, as well. I hope to hear some of them come up into today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 8, Bob Spayman, Blendon Township.
Excuse me, Bob Spayman, Blendon Township. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work environment at the county building. When I worked here 7 or 8 years ago as fiscal services director, the environment was excellent. But recent emails, confidential Facebook pages, talking to other employees, it's really deteriorated. They describe it as toxic, a dumpster fire, a train wreck, and many other things from the good employees at the county. The common thread, Mr. Gibbs. Mr. Gibbs' management style is poor. He is incompetent, well over his head, not qualified for the position. He now has a special assistant to bring him his coffee or donuts or shine his shoes or whatever else she may do or he may do. He is laughed at. They don't trust him. He is joked about. In another organization, he would be gone by now, but nowhere. But now he is protected by the OI members as support. Maybe with a recall of Mrs. Ebels and someone with some sanity comes into place, maybe that will change. People are leaving the county through resignations. My good friend Patrick Waterman, who did that, couldn't get along with Mr. Gibbs. They're retiring or they're just quitting. Employees are worried that unqualified OI people will replace them like Mr. Gibbs. Soon there will be nobody at the Fillmore or other locations except OI people. They're pleading for help. They want the 5 non-OI commissioners to get involved. They want the 6 OI members to communicate with them, which they don't. Of course, they don't answer emails, they don't talk with the press, but they want to do it before it gets worse. It will take years to undo what has been done. And if I hear Mr. Gibbs report that he did one brown bag, when Mr. Vanderberg and I did 2 or 3 a month, and also visited cities or townships once or twice, and if he says that the county is in good shape, I'm going to throw up because it's not. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Number 9, Karen Obitz, Spring Lake Township.
Karen Open Spring Lake. I've been thinking a lot about my experience at the last board meeting and sitting with the feelings that experience evoked. So I'd like to use my public comment today to echo the sentiments offered that night by several people who used their allotted time to comment, asking the board chair to insist on respectful attention from all those in attendance, no matter who was offering public comment. I'm personally not sure why it should matter who was offering public comment, whether respectful attention on the part of the audience was uniformly on offer, but it was my observation that it did seem to matter. Sometimes I try to imagine myself transported to this room from some other time, place, or culture. And I wonder what my observations would tell me about what is going on here and what conclusions I might draw about this community's character. Would I draw the conclusion that surely this is an assembly of those who reside in a majority conservative Christian community? I asked this board, and in particular its chair, to consider the value of these public comments and to demonstrate its respect for the forum in which they're offered by insisting on audience decorum. And in my remaining allotted time, I want to offer my view as to what the board's guiding principle should be as it deliberates over the 2024 budget. Namely, a people-focused approach. And given the nature of some of the public comments offered so far this morning, may I remind all of us that a people-focused approach should include our county employees. All of us benefit from the public services which our county administration, by means of all of its agencies, boards, and commissions, is tasked and funded to deliver. As is always true of community, our pooled resources are meant to provide what few, if any of us, can directly provide for ourselves. And I believe a healthy community is one in which pooled resources are put to use in a manner that ensures the greatest possible good to the greatest number of people. So I urge this board to make wise and hospitable decisions for the benefit of all who live here, no matter who they are. And as I was reminded during my early morning meditation, the answer given by a first-century Palestinian preacher to the ancient question, "Who is my neighbor?" which he offered by way of asking the equally timeless question, "Who isn't my neighbor?" should be the same answer we give to that question today.
Thank you.
Number 10, Sarah String, Grand Haven City.
Hello, my name is Sarah Strang. I live in the city of Grand Haven and I work at the Momentum Center. The Momentum Center is a nonprofit organization that creates community for those with mental illness, disabilities, and addiction. It costs $1 to be a member, and you don't need a formal diagnosis or referral to join. The Momentum Center offers social and recreational programs for both residents of Grand Haven and Holland. I'm the program coordinator for the Holland location, and we get referrals from the crisis intervention team, the intermediate school district, community mental health, and therapists. We also have members who have shown up at our door just wondering what we do, and they just heard about us somewhere. A third of our members at Holland have both mental illness and developmental disabilities. There is a mental health crisis in our community. People come to us when they need community support before being able to see a therapist or in between sessions. Some people have shown up and they were actively suicidal, and we are able to get them to the hospital for the care that they need. I choose to work at the Momentum Center because I fully believe in the mission. I believe everyone deserves a place in this community. I believe everyone deserves to be visible and connected. I know this firsthand because I see the difference that Momentum Center is making. And I see it in the joy of having an adult go to the zoo for the first time. I've heard conversations of anxiety, fear, and stress and joy, and I've seen the members embrace each other and offer support. I've helped a returning citizen apply for an ID so they can get a job and be a functioning member of our society. And I've driven members to the hospital when they have felt no hope, and I've sat next to them. And I embrace them when they return from the hospital, and we continue to offer support to them, to know that they matter and their lives matter. And as you serve the county, And as you begin to work through the budgeting process, I urge you to please be mindful of the mental health crisis within our community. And I urge you to prioritize our members and those in our community and myself. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That is all the pre-registered public commenters.
Great. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
My name's David Barnoski, and I'm a voter in Port Sheldon Township. I've stopped pre-registering because so I could react to what happens in the moment. We didn't organize it, but we just stopped clapping for each other today. We wanted to set an example, I guess, but we just all seem to do it at the same time. We have some new members here, so they didn't get the memo or didn't catch on to it. You have a member, or you have one of your regular speakers who comes up here and assassinates people's character on a regular basis. I have people even messaging me during the meeting here saying that they've given up. They think public comment is a waste of time, that you've all made up your minds on everything and it's just a waste of time. We should just walk away. But we keep coming here because we want the employees to know we're not giving up. You operate in a way that is scaring your employees away. We're here to make sure that they know we have their back. Now, some of you may not feel that's true. I hope you'll work to prove that it's not true. Take care of your people better, please. That's all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
Howdy, I'm Joe Spalding. I'm from Holland Township. Lucy shouldn't feel betrayed because county employees are exercising their First Amendment freedoms and petitioning the government and simply speaking or in assembling with others. But she should kind of feel betrayed because people who say they are her friend and students in her exercise classes have signed the petition. I was just thinking about how interesting it's going to be because we know a lot of county employees have quit. And when those folks speak up on some election ads for whatever it is John Gibbs thinks he's going to run for down the road, those commercials are going to cut down and he's going to lose even harder than he did this last time. And it's going to be hilarious. But I'm not here to talk about John Gibbs. I want to give you guys a little bit of a history lesson because some folks don't really understand the true history of Ottawa County or, specifically Holland. And I want people to understand that when the puritanical Dutch felt like there was religious backsliding in Massachusetts, well after they landed on Plymouth Rock, they moved to two places. They moved to Connecticut and they moved to West Michigan mostly. And when Van Raalte got here, what he saw were a bunch of natives on the south shore of Lake Macatawa, or the north shore rather, and the south side of the lake. And those natives were very, very French speaking and very, very Catholic. And he hated it because he associated the religious backsliding in Massachusetts with waves of Italian and Irish immigrants and Catholicism specifically. So he forced the Indians to the south or to the other side of Lake Macatawa and to the north side of Holland. That's why, Wakazu Woods is called Wakazu Woods. Wakazu Elementary is called Wakazu Elementary. And the interesting thing about that is the Dutch settlers were stealing so many things from the natives that, I love that Joe is just completely ignoring all of this, but that's fine. Other people are listening. When the natives were getting raided by the Dutch, and having all their furniture and all their items stolen, they decided they were sick of it. So they moved up to the Leelanau Peninsula and we named Wakazu Woods after the leader of the natives who bailed on us because we were stealing too much of their stuff. That's the origin of the city of Holland. When we look further north, we see areas where we had lumber barons and we had waves of French and Polish and German immigrants that worked lumber mills. And then all of a sudden, the post-war era, we had some Black families come up and settle and help work in these ancillary auto industry areas. And then suddenly we have the folks in places like the Tri-Cities area doing the hardest they can to keep people that don't look like them out. And they associate that again with their religiosity. So when it comes to this like Christian nationalism, I think it's important for the community to realize that there is a long-standing racial divide in Ottawa County that a lot of these commissioners just happened to stumbled into when they moved here, 20 or 30 years ago, and they never bothered to learn it. So I don't don't really begrudge Sylvia for not understanding the history of her community, but I really urge that she stop being so intellectually lazy and actually do her homework.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
David Moore in Allendale Township. First of all, Mr. Gibbs, I thank you for everything you do. I applaud you for being able to stand.
Mr. Moore, if you could please address your comments to the chair.
It is to the chair.
Thank
He
you.
does a good job.
Thank you.
Okay. And I appreciate you listening to me. And I appreciate everything Ms. Lucy Ebel's going through. And I applaud her efforts and the issues that she stood for. This board was changed for a reason. The citizens of Ottawa County voted new people in. We must remember that. When we're throwing darts and mud and everything else we want to sling, it's not you that they're slinging it at. It's everybody who put you there. And I hope you remember that. As a citizen of Ottawa County, I'm still waiting, and maybe I missed it, but if I have, please somebody let me know. In the past, I've seen a motion, a pre-resolution, pre-resolution, supposed to become a motion that had none of the wording correct. And that motion became a resolution. And I don't understand how this happens. As a trustee, we were taught the words we used in our motion were the resolution. And it was the clerk's responsibility to make sure that those words are exact, because every word mattered. I still have yet to hear how the motion from Mr. Kyers became a resolution that he had before him, according to the clerk, and he chose not to read it, but to ad lib or whatever you want to call it, and it didn't add up. According to law, that can't happen. I want to know how it happened. And second of all, when this board did the job of the past board and verified the minutes, you were not there because they failed to do their job at their last meeting and abandoned us. It was them giving us the finger, point blank, and so be it. But when those minutes were approved by this board, those minutes became your minutes. You have authority over them. When you found out those minutes were incorrect, it is your responsibility, according to the law, to correct those minutes. Nobody wants to talk about this fact. These are facts. And I applaud you for going back and doing that. And to be honest with you, many of the issues that they have today, they keep climbing on, it all goes back to that. You did your legally job that you're required to do, according to the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
John, and yeah, I just wanted to say I've been enlightened, not enlightened. The Lord has actually convicted me on my own shortcomings. And actually, I was kind of naive, you know, when I first started coming here. And I was actually unaware. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to my brothers and sisters. Thank you to Lucy for her spirit and for this prayer. And I do want to say, I want to encourage you guys because Jesus said he did not come to bring peace in this world. He came to bring division. And he says, I tell you these things, that all this evil is going to happen so that but before time, so that you'll have peace in me. So even if we don't win in this world, we're assured in the next life that we win out. And I do want to just say, what my naivety was, I did not know that some people that come up here and that are very rebellious against the law. I didn't know some people went to church that were doing this stuff. And so by the law, by the scriptures, I'm even supposed to say this, is that is crazy. The law in the scriptures, the law is meant to bring us to Christ, to a saving knowledge of who, well, I guess it shows us the truth of who we are how dirty and wretched and miserable we are. And not only that, but it lets us know that we need a savior. And so for those who claim to be a Christian and to go to church and to come up here and disrespect authority and to openly approve of transgenderism, because Deuteronomy 22:5 says men shall not dress like women and women shall not dress like men. If you approve of this, you don't know God, because the truth is not in you. John also says, if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, we lie, and the truth is not in us. And so I say, this is what our Lord Jesus, my Lord Jesus, says about you people. He says, hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy about you, saying, you draw near to me with your mouth and honor me with your lips, but your heart is far from me. And I would get right with the Lord, because you think that feeling a little shame here for the law is one thing. Well, everlasting shame and contempt, everlasting fire where the worm never dies, that's going to be a whole lot worse for you. So I want to bring that to your attention. And I also want to bring to attention to Jacob Bonema the fact that you can't play both sides of the fence. The Lord also says in Revelations, he says, those who are lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth. He's going to bring judgment to everybody for what they've done, good and evil in the flesh. And thank God we have Jesus Christ, because he covers both our iniquities and our good. None of it counts for anything except for Jesus Christ and what he did at the cross. And for that, he accepts our deeds and our offerings. But for the rest, Lord have mercy, and may God grant you repentance.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Rebecca Patrick from Allendale Township. I intended to make this comment at the Planning and Policy Committee meeting, but it seems more appropriate to do it now, so I'm going to do it now. I wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge the work of the Capital Improvement Plan team for the document that you're preparing to review this afternoon. It's clear that it will be helpful to everyone going forward as the Commission plans for capital expenses. But I do have an observation about the plan as it relates to Commissioner Cosby's recent public post on her personal webpage that states the following regarding body cams for the Sheriff's Department. She wrote this, quote, Sheriff Kemker and the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office applied for, but were denied ARPA funding to provide body cameras for their deputies. Number one, the department did not receive ARPA funding. Instead, the former board allocated funding to outside agencies and social programs. Number two, the new Board of Commissioners will work with the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office to allocate funding for body cameras and has been in active talks with the Sheriff's Office and administration about these needs, end quote. The implication of this statement is that funds to purchase body cams have not been allocated. But the plan before you clearly states that body cam funding is already in place. The page that covers information technology capital improvement shows us that funding for body cams was approved by previous commissions in the amount of $1,045,000. This money was appropriated for body cams beginning in fiscal year 2017, but has not been spent. It is there, ready to be used. I think it's safe to say that most Ottawa County residents expect and desire their elected officials and employees to work together to solve problems and bring the community together at every opportunity. I encourage you to do that in good faith, and I applaud the work of the Ottawa County staff members who put together this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? All right, seeing none, we will move on, and I would look for a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
A motion and support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Number 7, consent resolutions. Look for a motion to approve the consent resolutions.
Move.
Second.
A motion and support. Let's go to a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Belknap.
Yes.
Mrs. Curran. Yes. Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Mr. Bonema.
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey.
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra.
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra.
Yes.
Mrs. Miedema.
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel.
Yes.
Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Mr. Moss.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, moving on, we have no public hearings. And today there are no additional action requests. So we'll go to number 10, committee reports, starting on a report from the county administrator.
Thank you, Chair Moss. I would just like to take a few minutes to talk about a few accomplishments that I think are noteworthy and that the public should know about as we are here in our 7th or 8th month in this role. I think it's very exciting stuff that we're looking at, and I'm optimistic about what we're looking at for the future. So I'd just like to go over a few things here. The first is the process for the FY24 budget. We did make a few changes to that I thought would increase transparency, that would give all of the commissioners a chance to have a more in-depth look at the budget, as well as a better look at all county spending and the usage of funds in a wider way than is normally presented as part of the budget process. So one way we did that is I asked our great fiscal services department, which by the way is doing a really, really excellent job on the budget and the capital improvement plan. So I want to thank them, and I'll thank them again later, but just want to give a good shout out to our fiscal services department. We are including intergovernmental revenue and grants as part of the budget review process. So that will show the grants that the county is receiving, as well as funds from the states and funds from the federal government. So the commissioners can have a look at that, understand what that part of our funding looks like. We all know that part of the county government is funded by millage, but it's also partially funded by various grants and intergovernmental revenue as well. So I think it's important to include that in part of the budget review process. And that is typically not done, but I think it's a good change to include that this time and going forward. We are also including accounts payable. That is a list of all recipients of county funds. And so you have that as part of the FY24 packet that we reviewed last time. So you can see exactly who the county money is going to. So that I think goes a long way in increasing transparency, giving all the commissioners and the public a better look at exactly who the county money is going to, both large amounts and small amounts. We've included personnel requests in this portion of the budget review. It normally is presented as part of the overall budget plan, but not necessarily at this stage in the process. So because new personnel requests are a significant part of the budget for the upcoming year, I think it's important to look at that at this point in the budget process. So that is now included in what you all are looking at. I did want to also have a focus more on departments and programs. Internally, inside of the county systems, we use a piece of software called Munis, which does get the job done for us, but it tends to view things in terms of funds, which is kind of an accounting concept. And that is important to include. So that is in the budget as well. But I wanted to have a focus on departments and programs as well, because that is kind of what regular folks who are not in the financial weeds all day are familiar with. So we do have that part up front in what you're reviewing. And I think that's better for transparency and ease of understanding. We also, as you know, added 2 additional special work sessions to review the FY24 budget. One of those is happening this Thursday, and the other one is happening on Monday, August 21st. I wanted to give the commissioners a more time to deliberate and review the FY24 budget, as well as the public to see those deliberations as well. That is something that is typically not done. So I think that goes a long way in increasing transparency. So those are just a few of the changes to the budget process. And I want to thank again all of our staff who had to submit all their information and all their numbers as part of the budget process, but especially our great fiscal services team who really is doing a tremendous job in preparing the budget. So that's one thing I wanted to update everyone on. The second update is on the capital improvement plan. As we all know, the capital improvement plan is a 5-year forward-looking plan for capital improvements. Those are improvements to facilities and infrastructure that are over a certain amount. Typically, what has been done in the past is that the proposed CIP plan will be presented at a planning and policy meeting, and then it will be voted on at the same meeting, which I felt did not necessarily give the commissioners enough time to review that before voting on it. So what we did this time is we separated that out, and I created, with your approval, of course, a special work session, which will be happening today at noon, as it turns out, which was 1 week after the CIP plan was initially presented, so that the commissioners could have that 1 week to review the CIP and ask any questions and go over the information prior to voting on it. So I think it does increase accountability and transparency to give all the commissioners that extra week to review the capital management plan. As one of the public commenters mentioned, I did instruct our capital improvement plan team to develop a capital management plan and to go to the next step and just cataloging all of our capital needs across the county. Those are everything from parking lot repairs to heating and air conditioning and any repairs to buildings that need to happen. And having a whole life cycle planning aspect to that so that we can look at where the life cycle of a building might be at any given point and what maintenance needs to be done preventatively in order to prevent a catastrophic failure later on that might cause an even greater cost. And we are really moving along on that. I'm pretty happy with what I see from the capital improvement plan team on getting that into place so that we can really have a more mature way of managing all of our capital assets across the county. To that point, I also want to point out our facilities department, which is also doing a really tremendous job in reorganizing and cataloging and just getting a grip on everything across the county's facilities wise and all of our capital assets. I did ask them to do a restructure and I really left the latitude there with the director, Blake, who really dived in and looked at everything happening in his department and the way it was structured. And they have moved towards a new organizational structure that will allow for more efficiency, that will allow for more delegation, and that will allow for the director to just really step back and spend more time looking at big picture items and strategy. So I'm really happy with the direction that's going, and I think we're going to continue to get good things happening at our facilities department, not only in terms of capital improvements, but overall just facilities management at large. Going forward, I think a few things we want to look at are some budgeting software that I think will really add a lot. Well, most importantly, will cut down on the amount of time it takes our great staff to prepare the budget. We use Munis right now, which is a financial management software tool used by many local jurisdictions around the country. It can sometimes be a little bit unwieldy. And so I think perhaps adding some budget software on top of that, that might allow for dashboard functionality, easy manipulation of scenarios and numbers without having to have our fiscal services department go in and do manual work and produce Excel spreadsheets and pivot tables and whatnot. I think that'll go a long way in increasing transparency and taking a lot of workload off of our fiscal services department so that they can focus on other things. So doing some serious investigations right now on the different options out there that could help us to really streamline and reduce the amount of man hours it takes to process and prepare the budget. So that's something I'm pretty excited about. Again, I'd like to just thank all of our staff, not only fiscal services, not only facilities, but all the departments have to present their budget numbers to fiscal services, and there's a lot of work involved in that. So I do want to thank our staff and really being on top of that and preparing the budgets. And yeah, I'm excited about all these changes going forward. We'll continue to refine them and continue to increase transparency and give the commissioners as many chances as possible to be able to look at the data in an in-depth of way as possible. So yeah, that's just a brief update on some recent accomplishments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions on those recent updates? Great. Thank you, Administrator Gibbs. Moving forward, we are on the overview of the capital improvement plan. Welcome, Karen.
Good morning.
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 Is the presentation here today? There you go.
Yes, it is.
Just like magic. Thank you. So the capital improvement plan for the county. Today, we're going to talk about what a capital improvement plan is, the team that works behind the scenes to develop that, the goals we set for ourselves this year, and then some of the trends that you're seeing. So a capital improvement plan lays out financing, location, timing for capital projects over several years. Generally, capital projects exceed $50,000 and they do not repeat in one cycle, one 5-year cycle of the plan. The team that pulls it together is currently reviewing and making recommendations is Blake Upright, Paul Sachs, Paul Klimas, and myself. Parks has a separate process to manage millage funds. Once it's completed and approved by the Parks Commission, it's consolidated with the county plan so that we have a single capital project plan. The goals that we set for ourselves, I'll share in more detail in a few slides, but we wanted to set an annual amount dedicated to capital projects. The team also supports the use of asset management tools, especially in facilities, to allow data-driven decisions. We wanted project submission process to be updated so project requests receive more of a comprehensive focus. During fiscal year 24, facilities and the team want to review building systems and standards, including ADA requirements, to create an action plan for future years. So this is the Parks project with their master plan and millage funding. So you'll notice it ebbs and flows based on that millage funding. And this is approved by the Parks Commission and then folded into our capital plan. For background, the county has had a capital improvement plan since 2015. And here's a history of projects by fiscal year. So this is pulled directly from the capital improvement plan that's been adopted by the board. The committee approach is to smooth the projects with a goal of being more proactive and less reactive. Sometimes we respond to the financing. So the history, smoothing projects require a smoothing of the funding of projects. So the dark orange line represents one-time funding that is transferred to capital improvement fund, and the light orange is the general fund transfer. So for several years, if you read back in the budget memo, it's been identified as a goal to increase that ongoing contribution from the general fund to fund projects. The CIP team is recommending the use of $5 million of ARPA funds, replacement savings, to transition to an annual funding of $5 million a year. So this graph again shows fiscal year 22 with the dark orange being a one-time contribution, and then the light orange still the general fund. The blue in the future years starting in fiscal year 24 is the $5 million that has been set aside or committed to capital projects. So transferring that in fiscal year 24 as part of the budget process, and then using those funds over future years. The capital improvement plan, there's a special, as Mr. Gibbs mentioned, there's a special work session today to review the actual plan and answer any questions. The column fiscal year 24 is currently in the proposed budget. So the funding for fiscal year 24 has already been built into the proposed budget. Any changes that result from this plan or approved by the board would require an update to the proposed county budget overall. Were there questions, or I know that there wasn't, also the proposed budget was next, so.
Any questions on CIP? Well, let's continue moving along. Thank you.
Also, the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget. What we wanted to talk about is some budget basics, some assurances, estimates, the proposed budget, and then some trends and highlights. So the total county budget includes as multiple funds and activities that all roll together with the county budget. So that includes in special revenue funds, there's the parks funds, it's funded by the parks millage. The CMH fund is largely funded by Medicaid and also a millage as well. And then there's 20 other special revenue funds. So even though some of those budgets flow through other boards and commissions, they all roll into the total county budget and is approved by this board, the public hearing, and other activities. But this board is really the formal adopting body. some budget basics. Revenues plus reserves minus expenditures must be greater than zero. So this is, we cannot adopt a budget with a deficit or end the year in a deficit. The legal level of control is by department, by fund, and then budgets do include estimates and assumptions. So we make estimates and assumptions as we prepare for the budget, and then we monitor to make sure that those estimates are close to what actually happens during the year. Some assurances is this budget is balanced. It maintains fund balance within policy. All debt payments are funded, and then pension and retirement programs are funded. The estimates that were made in putting this proposed budget together is we estimated a taxable value growth of 7%. We continued with the millage rate of 3.9 mils, so that's unchanged from prior year. The current, the cost of living increase of 2% on January 1st of 2024. Health insurance increase of 3% at the same time frame. That's when our contracts look to, that's when our contract ends and starts. And then the ongoing grant revenue, we do estimate, sometimes we do have information from the granting agency of what that amount will be. So sometimes we're able to put in the exact amount. Other times we have to estimate, and then you'll see at the start of the year, that's what drives some of those budget adjustments at the beginning of the year when we realign that information. And then there's also contract increases. So for contracted services that are ending sometime during fiscal year 24, there's regularly new proposals or procurement of those activities to continue. And so we make estimates of what we think the impact of those changes would be. The total, the proposed budget for all funds is 269.3 million, which is a 5% increase over prior year. This graph is a trend of adopted budget and by fund type in multiple fiscal years with an annual percentage increase in between. So I'm going to focus on the light blue line. And talk about some of the changes between 23 and 24. Some of those changes actually occurred in the amended budget of 2023. And there's actually not that kind of increase between 23 amended and 24, but because we tend to look at adopted to adopted, that's why you're seeing some of those increases. So community mental health amended its budget during fiscal year 23 for budget increases in Medicaid, state dollars for client care. Those increases are staying in 24, but they have slowed. The increases have slowed. So you're not seeing that type of large increases as we amended the current budget. Now, as 24 goes on, and if something should happen to change, we would come back to the board and make some adjustments. Transfer of $5 million of ARPA savings to capital improvement fund. So that is something that doesn't happen every year. So it didn't happen in fiscal year 23. So in fiscal year 24, that's showing for an increase. In prior years, public health did not have COVID grants early enough. So we didn't have the dollar amounts early enough to include them in the budget. So they tended to happen as a budget amendment. In fiscal year 24, those amounts were shared early enough. We were able to enter them into the budget. So you're seeing an increase in grant activity there. So just transitioning then to the general fund and the dark blue line. On page 6 of the proposed budget gives a detailed list of the general fund changes, but some of the increases are increased funding for the state for specific items like early voting equipment and specialized public safety training. We also have inflationary pressure in contracts and utilities. The Family Justice Center is expected to come online and represents, I think there's 8 months of the Family Justice Center that's included in the proposed budget, operational costs, and then administrative support in the prosecuting attorney and sheriff's office for body cams that are expected to be implemented in fiscal year 24. That is also a partial year with I think a February 1st kind of planned start date for some of those new positions that are required. So the 90% of the general fund revenues are funded by three categories: taxes, charges for services, and intergovernmental revenue. Charges for services are fees for services such as the Register of Deeds recording and transfer fees, and overhead charges to grants. Examples of intergovernmental revenue in the general fund are state shared revenue of 5.6 million and local community stabilization of 2.2 million. These are less restrictive than some of the intergovernmental revenue that you would see in the special revenue funds. In the general fund, it's a general revenue, so it can be used for multiple activities. So if that is where our money comes from, the three categories of expenses represent 75% of general fund expenses. 48% of expenditures are for personnel costs. As a customer service organization, we are largely staff and people. So what we do is that's why a large percentage of the budget is dedicated to paying employees. 15% is transfers to other fund to pay county match for programs. So that transfers out category. For example, friend of the court, 34% is a contribution from the general fund or not eligible for the funding that pays for our friend of the court activities. Juvenile services, childcare, that's a 50-50% split. And then public defender and others, there's a county match. So the public defender office is largely funded by the state, but there is $1 million or almost $1 million contribution from the general fund, which is transferred to that fund to track that activity. Contribution to component units are taxes collected for the road commission and dispatch authority and are passed through to those entities. So here are the 9 largest departments in the general fund, showing 22 actual expense, 23 adopted budget compared to fiscal year 24 proposed budget. So that's the dark blue line. The orange line is the 23 adopted compared to the 24 proposed. So fiscal year 22 for the sheriff, district court, prosecutor, circuit court, clerk, register of deeds is less than normal. This is because ARPA revenue replacement was used to pay personnel costs in these departments. So you're seeing a shorter blue line than you would normally see trending. So as you're looking at that proposed budget and the trends, that would be important to realize that's a major driver of that. If the county did not have these ARPA funds, the blue line would look more like the treasurer's office there, where it's more in line and just slightly increasing, and fiscal services at the bottom. On page 7 through 39 of the proposed budget, it does show all the departments in the general fund in detail. So talking about next steps, this was presented at the finance committee last week, but the proposed budget has been presented to finance. The expectation is for the finance committee to review that. I think Mr. Gibbs had mentioned 2 work sessions that are currently planned, all leading to a public hearing on September 12th. And then September 19th, another finance committee meeting to pass the resolution to go to the full board to adopt the budget. And then October 1st would be our fiscal year start date.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions? I had 2 brief ones. So I had some constituent questions, which you actually answered, but I'd like to go back and highlight just so it makes it real easy. In some of the numbers on salaries, there was an area where it said salaries out of the general fund were 10 million, not 20 million or something like that. So it looked low, but that was due to ARPA replacement. So can you just kind of share a little more about how that worked?
Sure. So as Mr. Gibbs alluded to, the funds are an accounting function, and the state actually has a uniform chart of accounts, which we follow. And the ARPA dollars were required to be accounted for in a separate fund. So when we had that replacement revenue, we had our ARPA dollars in our ARPA fund, tracking that grant activity that we reported to the Department of Treasury. So we moved expenses from the general fund to the grant when it was revenue replacement. So therefore, in the general fund, you would see a reduced expenditure for those departments that we engaged in projects and did that. You would see those actual expenditures occur in that other fund, still within the department, but when you're just looking at the general fund, you wouldn't necessarily see that.
Thanks. And the one other one is related to CIP. So CIP is kind of a plan, right? And there still are a lot of unknowns based on timing or future costs, things like that. But the goal is to be proactive and not reactive. You had mentioned that. So I just wanted to highlight that and see if there was anything else you wanted to add.
Sure. So that's part of the facility's goal in using some of those tools that we have at our disposal to evaluate building condition and to come up with a replacement plan that is fixing things before they're fixed. For example, if you think about it like the brakes on your car, you have an indicator of when they might go bad. So obviously you want to fix the brakes before you don't have them. And it's usually more cost effective to do it that way and just better overall management of your vehicle. So if you think about it in terms like that, that's our goal.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonema.
Karen, thanks for being here this morning. The graphics are great. They're very helpful. Were you here right at the beginning of the meeting for public comment? I didn't see when you came in.
I was out in the hall for a few minutes.
In the hall. I don't know if you heard Mr. Kuras give a idea for the public, a graphic of some sort to talk about what changes are actually being implemented for the public's sake, just so they can break it down as the budget gets finalized. Is that something we can continue to talk about and see just where it's made very clear? I think he gave the example of the DEI department, but there's lots of potential things that we could, pull out and show.
Sure. So, yes, I think we could, as this budget evolves into something that's represented for the public hearing, we would talk about the major changes that have occurred and evolved between the 2 years.
Great. I think I heard other public commenters mention transparency is really important to them. And I think graphics definitely translate a lot of transparency.
Much easier than those large spreadsheet of numbers.
Yes, my eyes are tired. So, but thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Ebel.
Yes, on the page where it's general fund expenditures by department, can you elaborate a little bit on what non-departmental means or what that includes? Give some examples.
Sure. So non-departmental is it's made up of a couple of things. It's made up of transfers. So really not a specific department overseeing that expense. I suppose fiscal services processes those transfers, but really not connected to the operations of a department. So transfers to other funds would be there. The contingency we keep that in non-departmental because it requires board action to reallocate contingency. So showing that in non-departmental. Because the legal level of control is by department, by fund. So contingency would be in the non-departmental section of the budget. And then we also put our PA2 dollars, our convention and facilities tax dollars in non-departmental because that is 50% dedicated to substance use disorder and 50% general revenue. So we immediately receive those funds from the state and disperse 50% to the Lakeshore Regional Entity who helps manage the substance use disorder grants throughout the county. And then the other 50% is a general revenue. So there's not a particular department that's an operational activity of that department. So we show it as non-departmental.
Thank you. Any final questions?
Just a point of clarity, and I think it'll probably help kind of answer a question that was posed earlier. So you brought up changes in the budget for fiscal year 2024, and one of those things was the body cams. Just a question for you. Was there an ARPA request by the Sheriff's Department for funding for those body cams?
No, well, because there was funding already from the risk reduction grant from the insurance authority for the actual expenditure. The item that's included in the 24 budget is the administrative cost to help manage and oversight of the body cams once they're implemented, but there was no ARPA request.
That's interesting because like during orientation, we were informed that that was actually requested and turned down. So ergo what I wrote.
Well, I don't know. I wasn't participatory to all those conversations. I wasn't a participant to all those conversations. If there was some discussion amongst county administration but it wasn't an actual request submitted.
Is there any place we could actually have access to the request from our ARPA funds previously?
So there is I believe that the DSI office has all of those requests, and I think they're on our team site, but I'd have to validate that every single one was there. But I'm pretty sure that is available information. We had a form where there was a process. We reviewed and discussed the requests, so they are available.
Wonderful. I've had a few constituents ask for that. So thank you, Karen.
Commissioner Bergman.
Karen, remind me if this is incorrect, but I believe when we first got the ARPA funding, that the restrictions were such that it wasn't available for any infrastructure. Is that correct? And I remember after a while, the restrictions eased somewhat after a year or so. But initially, those dollars weren't available for the Sheriff's Department to use.
There were so when the money was initially first made available, there was something they called a preliminary final rule. A preliminary final rule, I think was the actual title.
Right.
And that was in place for probably the first year.
Right.
And they took a lot of feedback from the categories and the areas where people were wanting to support and making things clearer. So there was a lot of uncertainty in that first year about how things qualified. And so there was a lot of questions surrounding that. When they came out with the final rule, that was I think it was about a year after the funds were available, and a lot of they made things simpler. They removed some of even the reporting requirements that you would normally follow with federal funds.
So there would not have been any request for funding for the Sheriff's Department at that time, at the beginning. As I recall, there was not any.
Because the main categories were so
right.
The main categories were very specific, and so people really only thought that it could be spent here and here,
right.
And it was very limited. Even the revenue replacement option was not clear on how to do the calculation and how to know if that was an option. And the final rule, just as an example, they allowed small governments just to say, if it's less than, I don't know, if it was $1 million, you could just dedicate it all and you did not have to comply with all of these other categories and items.
Right. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Just to help clear up, I think we discussed this maybe on the first business meeting of the year. The packet for November 22 does list all the items that were submitted as well as the items that were approved.
Anyone else? Any other comments? All right. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. All right, moving on. We are at our second opportunity for public comments. If anyone would like to come forward and address the board, please direct your comments to the chair and you'll have 3 minutes.
I forgot one thing is that, and this is really, I don't expect everybody to actually go ahead and check this out, but this is just for anybody, hopefully anybody who's even a little bit slightly unsure about the truth. And I know most people have kind of divided one side or the other, but the friend or the world is not your friend, whether you be a believer in Christ or not. The ruler of this world is Satan, and he tells lies. And if you have any love for your children, care and concern, and you are giving them COVID shots, I just want to encourage you to go look and see what www.rumble.com and watch the waters, because what's in COVID and what's in the shots that they're curing you with is snake venom. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
Dave Moore in Allendale. I would just like to say this. As a taxpayer, look for value. When you're going through this process, I ask you to please look for value. I don't want cheap, and I don't need to have a Taj Mahal, but I do need the best bang for the buck. Okay. That pretty much does it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other final public comment? Do we have anyone online? Maybe one person online, maybe, or? Hi, Marla. Marla, you may be muted. You could unmute yourself. We'll see if we can get your public comment in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, great. One quick thing. An Ottawa Impact member recently wrote an article which stated that, quote, Ottawa County is filled with everyday Americans who simply want to live their lives and raise their children in freedom according to their values, end quote. I agree wholeheartedly with that. The values of every resident should be respected and their individual freedoms given equal consideration. So during budget season, I think it's critical to serve all your constituents, not just those who agree with you. Those everyday Americans you talk about who want to live their lives in freedom are all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Is that all the online? Okay. All right, we'll continue to item 12, additional business. Report from County Administrator. Mr. Gibbs, anything additional?
Yes, thank you, Chair Moss. Just a couple of updates. The Deputy Administrator position was posted yesterday. We already have significant interest from very talented people, both from Ottawa County as well as around the country. So it's going to be a very good process. I'm excited about that. Body cameras were mentioned a couple of times. Those are included in the budget. There's about 9 positions that'll be required in the sheriff's office, as well as in the prosecutor's office, largely to process the large volume of FOIAs, which will be anticipated on those body camera videos, which will have to be redacted and processed, and which is a very labor-intensive effort. And there will also need to be supervision over those doing those activities and training, et cetera. So those are accounted for in the budget currently. Then there's actual cost of the body camera solution itself, which the first portion, as Karen from Fiscal Services shared, will be covered by the insurance authority, and we will So that will be budgeted for. We are also looking at revenue sharing with some of the local communities. That's something we already do. The county does provide law enforcement services for many local communities, so we'll be sharing the cost and looking at the breakdown of that as well. So body cameras are going forward. Also, someone mentioned brown bags. Those are largely on hold over the summer as people are on vacation. Those pick back up again in early September. And there are 16 more scheduled for the remainder of the year. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Zylstra?
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Just a quick question, Administrator Gibbs. I appreciate the breakdown on the body cam capital costs coming out of insurance authority, as you said. Personnel, are there any grant possibilities? Is that all going to be general fund?
That is a good question. The sheriff's office is looking at any available grants for that. I think that is still an ongoing process for them, but I would support that for sure. Finding any grant opportunities.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
That would be wonderful. Commissioner Bonema?
Yeah, several months ago, we were deliberating a new public comment policy, and we were looking for a recommendation from council on that. Is there any progress made towards that?
I believe that is still under consideration. I don't know if there's any update from anyone else on that. Yep.
Nope, not at this time.
Is there a time where we might expect to hear back on that? I don't know if we're waiting on hearing back from someone else or.
At this time, I think it's just still under consideration. I don't know if there's an actual time frame associated with it.
And then with your new hires, both for your assistant, maybe you could mention that for a second, if you've got any progress there.
Yes, that person is starting on August 21st.
Oh, is that person been made public? Who that is?
I don't know. I mean, I know who it is. HR knows who it is. So, yeah.
When will we find out?
I can let you know at any time.
How about
I'd love to introduce you.
Yeah, who is it now?
I'm not going to get into that right now, but what I would like to do is have you meet him and yeah.
Okay. Is there a reason why we wouldn't make his name known?
I don't want it to be a public spectacle.
Okay. And then as we're hearing from the public, these lucrative severance packages, are we looking at those as we make new hires as to if we're going to rein those in a little bit?
Severance packages only apply if someone is coming in on a contract. For example, the position you just mentioned, the senior executive aide is on the regular pay scale, so that doesn't apply there. The previous deputy county administrator had that. We will see what we do with the deputy county administrator that ends up getting hired. That is certainly something that it could be open to discussion.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Any other questions? Commissioner Curran?
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask about one of the public commenters mentioned that we were going to be doing, I am a loss for word, but to go through and meet with all the department heads, this strategy session for the budgeting process. Could you provide an update on that?
Yeah, that was not really in reference to the budgeting process. That was more in reference to the strategic plan.
Thank you.
And that
That's
is
the word.
Sure. And that is underway right now. In the sense that I am meeting with the directors and we're bouncing ideas back and forth. So that is a process that is a little bit on hold due to the budgeting process right now. But that is definitely happening. We are going to do, someone mentioned the offsite that happened last June. That will be happening. The time frame will be different, but so that is in process.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Anything else? Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to 12B, a report on the recent meeting with the Ottawa County Foster Parent Coalition. Who would like to start? Commissioner Rhodey.
I'll take that one. So Allison or Commissioner Miedema and I were able to meet with a coalition of our foster care agencies and get an update from the licensors on basically the status of foster care in Ottawa County. So Kendra Spanger of MDHHS helped to put that together for us. And we had just a really great meeting. So I thought it might be helpful for us to share some information that we learned. Because I feel like oftentimes we don't really have a good look at what foster care is looking like in Ottawa County, as a lot of us aren't touching it personally. So Just some basic information is, as of June of 2023, there were 103 Ottawa County youth in foster care. The removals by zip code, or in general area, in 2022, there were 22 cases where removal occurred. This affected 45 children. So oftentimes kids stay in care for longer than a year. So that's how we have 103 kids in care, but 45 children removed in the year of 2022. So in combining 2 zip codes in Holland, there were 15 total cases with removals, which means that 68% of the removals occurred in the city of Holland. And that was 6% higher compared to 2021. In Grand Haven, there were 2. And then there was 1 in Fruitport, 1 in Jenison, 1 in Muskegon, 1 in Spring Lake, and 1 in Zealand. So, really the greatest need for that intervention is happening in Holland. When you look at where the foster homes are located throughout the county, they really are throughout the county. They're throughout all of our different townships and cities. So the entire county is pitching in to help with our children, which is great. Our children are in care by living arrangement. 41% of them are in licensed foster0homes, and 39% were in relative licensed or unlicensed homes. And just a little bit more on that. The numbers of children in care, I was very, very, I don't know if impressed is the right word, but relieved to hear that. There are 103 children in care in our county that has almost 300,000 people. I saw a statistic on Kent County, which is where I used to work in foster care, and there were in 2022 512 children in foster care in a county with a population of 658,000. So about twice as big as us, but a significantly larger amount of children being removed in Kent County. The ratio of caseloads of children to workers was really great. We have, I think it was about 13 children to a worker, which is a really nice low workload, as well as the number of foster homes to licensors. That was also very, very low. So again, really good attention is being given. Or at least, statistically, it's very possible to give that good attention. And I have to say too, we're, I think, both impressed by the compassion and quality of the staff. And so we have some really good people working in foster care. Another great thing happening is that the definition of fictive kin has expanded, which allows children to be placed with significant relationships. It doesn't just have to be a blood relative to be considered a relative for those placements. So that is a great thing happening there. One thing that I thought was really cool was that they actually make freezer meals and bring them to families in crisis. So, if a foster family is just having a really rough time, they even have that personal touch going. So, some of the groups there were Ottawa's MDHHS, Bethany Christian Services, Arbor Circle, Catholic Charities. And if I missed anybody, I apologize, but great work happening. And I think overall, like one takeaway for me was how strong our families are in Ottawa County. It's so great that these numbers are low. And then also how compassionate our people are in the homes. We have strong foster homes and great agencies taking care of them. So hope that work continues.
Thank you. Anything in addition?
Nope.
Good. Okay. All right. Any questions? Commissioner Zylstra?
Commissioner Brody, could you share that? Is that a PowerPoint?
It is. I can share.
I'd appreciate
Sure.
that. Thank you. That's very great.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay. Moving on to 12C, report on the Ottawa County Farm Bureau Summer Picnic. Who wants to take that one? Commissioner Miedema.
Right. So a few of the commissioners were able to attend, and we had Commissioner Belknap, Commissioner Moss, Commissioner Rhodey, and myself. I don't think I missed anybody. So just to share a little bit about that, Ottawa County is one of the most agriculturally diverse counties in the nation and helps to sustain thousands of jobs. So last week, Thursday, August 3, was the Ottawa County Farm Bureau Summer Picnic, which was held at the Drenth Community Ballpark. Many farmers, along with local elected officials, joined together for conversation while sharing a meal. Young and old alike enjoyed interacting with animals that were brought in from the critter barn. We heard a bit about agriculture in the classroom, taking place in schools throughout Ottawa County. Events coming up sponsored by the Agriculture Preservation Board that's held here within the county, as well as the Ottawa County Soil Conservation District. An update coming soon to the Ottawa County Farm Bureau's website was shared, and an invitation to become a member of the Farm Bureau and how the Farm Bureau benefits all citizens, not only farmers. County commissioners as well as constituents are invited to attend this year's Farms Are the Tapas event held on Thursday, September 28, from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Red Shed in Hudsonville. Feel free to reach out to me for more details as I serve on the Agriculture Preservation Committee, or do a simple search on the county website by typing in Farms Are the Tapas, TAPAS, in the county search bar. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, seeing as we've reached the end of our agenda, thank you, everybody. We'll call this meeting adjourned.